All right, we're back here on the Chase Most podcast as we're taping this on a Thursday afternoon. First timer Jake Arthur is here. Jake, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm awesome. Thanks for having me, Chase.
Thank you for being here. So there's a lot of crossover, and it's funny because coming into the year, me and the fellow Atlanta sports guys, we were talking about, like, we thought the Falcons, this was just going to be a rough rebuilding year, right? We thought, okay, we need to find somewhere else to latch on emotionally, because it's hard to latch on to a team that's quote-unquote tanking in the NFL. It's a long season, and you're just like, what? Do I really want to be emotionally invested in Marcus Mariota and Cordero Patterson, and also always be emotionally invested in Cordero Patterson is always my line of thinking, but more of like a Olamide Zaccheaus type issue, Brian Edwards, and this, that, and the other. But the Colts made sense. Matt Ryan, who was done dirty here in Atlanta, they did him, like, at the very end, putting him where he probably wanted to go. A great spot for him in Indianapolis. Then Julio was a free agent, and I was like, oh, the Colts are thin at receiver. Just bring in Julio too, and then I can just transform all of my emotional energy this year to the Colts and a Matt and Julio reunion. Obviously, Julio ends up in Tampa Bay. Gross. But Matt goes there, and we thought this would be one of the more seamless fits where they were the favorites coming in, and look, the season's long. A lot can change. We're only 4 weeks into it. But for me, it's just so weird that the Colts feel so, on the outside looking in, average. And I wonder if you have gotten the same sense. Like, if you had to explain why the Colts just feel bleh through the first month of the season, how would you do that, Jake?
Yes, I agree. Coming into it, there was a lot of hype and expectations. Myself, I assumed they should be the favorites in the AFC South, which they still might be. It's a division that no one really wants to run away with it, apparently. But man, it's part of their issues are explainable, and the other parts are just head scratching. So the offensive line is causing kind of a domino effect with everything, and its struggles in itself are inexplicable. They have these pillars, and Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith, but Nelson's really the only one holding up his end of the bargain. Kelly does not look like himself. Smith had a terrible start to the season. They already had to replace their starting right guard, Danny Pinter, with Will Fries. Matt Pryor is okay. Like, they could probably survive with him there at left tackle, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them move on to Bernard Ryman here soon. So the offensive line is really making things struggle. In part, I think it's causing Matt Ryan to not look like what everyone expected. I'm now seeing that he's not going to be the type of guy. He's not going to be a Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck Superman type that can just erase all the deficiencies. Like, he has to have help. He can be a really good quarterback, but he has to have help. The protection, the receivers getting separation, things like that. So I don't think that part of it's a failure yet. But the offensive line, if they don't improve, then the whole thing will just be a meltdown. They've just been really bad. Jonathan Taylor, who looks superhuman at times, has not been given very many running lanes, and he's kind of creating all of his own yards. And even when he does have running lanes now, it seems like he doesn't have a feel for this offensive line particularly. He doesn't really know how to read their holes that they are opening. So it's kind of rough all around with that, and that creates turnovers. Matt Ryan is fumbling at a record pace right now. He's got 9. He had 10 He had 10 last week before the stats guys corrected one. So that's really rough. Turnovers, of course, that frequent amount of them. With his interceptions, I think he has 5. It puts the defense in a tough spot, and the defense honestly has played pretty well overall. I think they're another group that's holding up their end of the bargain, but the offense and their instability is just totally putting the defenses back against the wall. The offense, if you look at DVOA from Football Outsiders, they're like far and away the 32nd ranked defense or offense. So it's just, man. And the other part of it, I think, is coaching and scheme related. And the part that comes in, I was talking about being inexplicable, is how flat they look at times. In their three non-wins, because they have a tie in there, they've been behind by at least 17 points in each of them.
Hmm.
And you ask them about it after the game, they're like, I don't know, we had a great week of practice, yada yada. And they got killed in the last 2 weeks of 2021 when all they needed to do was beat either the Raiders or Jaguars just to get into the playoffs. And that was two obviously winnable games. So the reason, them coming in looking so flat, unprepared, things like that, no one knows what's causing that. You can look at the offensive line, which is kind of having a trickle-down effect on things. But the other part of it is, why do they look so unprepared? No one really seems to have an answer for that, unfortunately.
That's interesting, because it just seems like Frank Reich and this group, I mean, everyone's been penciling in the Colts to break through and win this division year over year. They're everyone's favorite offseason team. Everyone loves the way they build. Everyone loves the way they draft. And yet there just seems to be something missing from them making the leap. Like, you mentioned Matt Ryan, and he's not an Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, just cover up all the weaknesses and the holes of any type of team. If they have struggling offensive lines, the running lanes aren't opening for Jonathan Taylor, so Matt Ryan's got to do more stuff. I mean, is it still a Matt Ryan problem? Do you think he's regressed from, what we saw in Atlanta the last couple of years? Do you think some of it falls on Matt Ryan just not playing up to what folks in Indianapolis expected of him, or do you think it's far, far bigger, and Matt Ryan, with a better offensive line play and Jonathan Taylor being able to run the ball more, is more than capable of leading this team to where they want to go?
So I think part of it is Ryan, but I think he almost is like shell-shocked now. He's adopted some new issues that I don't think he had in Atlanta. Like, ball security was never a huge issue for him, right? Like, he'd fumble occasionally, went on a sack. Now, it seems like every time he gets hit or sacked with any impact, that ball's coming out. And that's really been the case. He's fumbling constantly right now. And I think that's a new habit that's been adopted because of how much he's getting hit here. He's under constant duress. I'm not sure that he trusts what's in front of him. So that's part of it. And he's also made some just kind of head-scratching throws, some interceptions that have just been like, where was that? Like, and it looks like that's probably miscommunication with the receivers. So you kind of side on the part of the veteran quarterback who's been around for 15 years on that one. So there's some growing pains, feeling out the protection or lack thereof in front of him and meshing with these new pass catchers. I think it'll be fine eventually if the offensive line can figure it out. Because things with Phillip Rivers a couple years ago were a little rocky in the beginning as well. They had some really bad losses and performances up until about the midway point of the season, and then it looked like Phillip Rivers' offense. Like, he was in control of everything, and that's kind of what I anticipate here. Again, if the offensive line itself can't figure it out, I hope the coaches have a plan for it. Adopt a quicker passing game, give more help to the offensive line, do something. But it's rough right now. And I think it's unfortunately having a negative effect on Ryan to where he's not really able to perform like the guy they thought they were getting.
Have Colt fans been just kind of extremely frustrated about the front office's insistence on just building everywhere else and just being like, all right, we're going to throw in the veteran Phillip Rivers, we're going to throw in the veteran Carson Wentz, we're going to throw in the veteran Matt Ryan, instead of just taking the lumps of spending one high draft pick on a quarterback the last couple of years? Or has it been like, all right, well, it's a little bit different way of team building. We like where you're drafting in other ways, so it's like, we're not going to bang you for that. And like, hindsight's 2020 with Carson Wentz, but ultimately, like you said, they were still a gimme in Jacksonville away from making the playoffs last year. Phillip Rivers obviously had a lot of success. Matt Ryan still TBD there. Or has it, like, which way is the wind blowing on that front, and has it been blowing the last couple of years?
Yeah, so things are starting to shift. Even those of us in the local media who we've given the front office and Chris Ballard a pass for a while, because even though we may not agree with all the moves and the total approach, we understand what they're doing and why. It's that earns you a little more patience, especially with a roster that seems to be able to stay afloat despite a new quarterback each year. But now it's really coming to a head because you're investing too much money and resources in positions. Not that these positions don't matter, but they're not the weighted positions between wins and losses. Your left guard is the highest paid guard in history. You have a $20 million linebacker. Your center has regressed and is the second highest paid center in the league. Your right tackle was a turnstile, and he's one of the highest paid tackles. Offensive line obviously is important, but that unit as a whole has a ton of money sunk into it. It seems like they're too apprehensive in just taking a quarterback for the sake of taking one. They don't want to just take a guy to do it. They want to take the right guy. But it's like, how strict are your parameters to not just do it? Because we've seen them. They traded the 13th overall pick a few years ago for DeForest Buckner, which it's a high enough pick. That was the same draft with Justin Herbert. They held the 34th overall pick in that. That's an option to where they could have packaged that pick and that 13th pick plus whatever else assets to try and get in that top 5 to get someone like Herbert or Tua. Burrow was going to be number 1 no matter what. But just take a chance. That's what they need to do now, because what they're doing right now is they're just wrapping themselves up in a blanket of mediocrity and just being comfortable with being competitive and occasionally getting some big wins and things like that. But to go to the next level, they're going to have to get that difference-making quarterback, and they're just going to have to get into the modern NFL. It's about offense. It's about explosive plays and rushing the passer. That's about all you need to do to win a Super Bowl anymore. Look at these teams that are competitive year after year. They have the quarterback. When it matters, they're able to get to the quarterback, and they've got some playmakers for that quarterback to get the ball to. And that's just not how the Colts are built right now. They like to draft and develop and reward their own talent. That's great. But sometimes those players aren't the ones that are going to win and lose you games. You've just got to sink it in to a position like quarterback that truly matters.
Where are they most vulnerable on offense, and where are they most vulnerable on defense through a month of the season?
So aside from the offensive line, obviously, their receiver group really got exposed in week 2 when Michael Pittman Jr. was out with his injury, because Alec Pierce was also out the same week. So their top 2 outside receivers were both out. Guys like Ashton Dulin and Paris Campbell were leading the way, Desmond Patman, and it just was ugly. Mm-hmm. And part of it's the offensive line not giving the receivers enough time to get separation, get open, and things like that. But they really, Alec Pierce probably is going to be a very good complementary piece to Michael Pittman, but it feels like they're missing one real dynamic pass catcher, whether that's at tight end or receiver. It could be either or nowadays. It doesn't have to be in just one spot. But I think if you're looking at something, Michael Pittman Jr. has become very, very valuable because of what's not behind him.
Interesting. The biggest surprise, though, for you has been where? It could be a player. It could be decisions the coaching staff has made one particular week. What has been the biggest surprise for you?
So if the offensive line is going to be as bad as it is, I think things you can do are, get screens going, get a quick passing game going. And then so that leads into why has Nyheim Hines not been used more? Coming into the season, he was one of the hottest, he was one of the hottest guys you could think of in terms of fantasy. If you're looking at it from that perspective, he's going to have a big year. Mm-hmm. The coaches were talking up, the other players were talking him up. Around here, we know that when there's a good quarterback under center that will use running backs in the passing game, that Hines is going to be a huge factor. And Matt Ryan is not afraid to get the ball to running backs. So the fact that he has just not been used very much at all when he is one of the more dangerous multi-purpose threats in the NFL, it's really been frustrating. I'm pretty sure every week we've been like, why is Nyheim Hines not more involved? And it might happen tonight, Thursday, against the Broncos, just by proxy of Jonathan Taylor being out. But it's almost malpractice to have this dangerous weapon on offense that you're just not using enough.
Yeah, that is That is odd, especially just with Frank Reich's in the past. Like that just seems like something you would not expect from him to not involve Naheem Hines
Right.
to the fullest extent. It's odd.
Hmm.
Um, the Tennessee game, though, what did you learn about the team that you did not already have a good feeling on? And coming out of it, you're like, all right, this is something that we have to monitor. This is something about them that it's just this is who they are.
Well, um, shoot, I would say that they're on. I've mentioned this in every question. I'm pretty sure you've asked me, but they're only going to get as far as the offensive line will take them. It is who they are right now.
Is Quentin Nelson been that bad? Is it? Is
It's
there?
not been Quentin. He's been the bright spot, really.
Okay. Which is a problem because everyone online is like, Quentin is he ever going to be the elite offense guard again this year?
Well, it's kind of like the Matt Ryan thing where
Yeah.
you can't hit your peak unless the things around you are going well also. Like he's
Hmm.
playing really well. Like he's still Pro Bowl, all pro caliber guy. But if your left tackle next to you keeps doing this and that and your center is leaking all these protections and everything and you kind of have to keep your focus in multiple areas, then it doesn't allow you to focus on your job solely altogether. So yeah, they've tried some new things. They have a new right guard. Danny Pinter started the first few games, and they replaced him with Will Fries, who looked fine. I mean, he didn't look perfect, but he definitely looked like an upgrade. But yeah, they're only gonna get as far as the offensive line will allow them to. Otherwise, it's gonna be a really ugly season because the coaching hasn't shown to be able to transcend that and adjust much to how bad their line is. Like normally, I've had former quarterbacks tell me, when you know your line is really bad, you
Hmm.
adjust to it. You get those quick passes out. You do this and that to beat the pressure that's coming at you. And the Colts just aren't showing that adaptability. I don't know why, because Frank Reich has always been a pretty good play caller and able to adjust and do this and that. But they might be naive about what they're able to do right now.
Is he a sneaky guy to be on like hot seat watch? Like a lot of people are not talking about. Is there a
Yeah,
possibility that?
yeah, because I don't anticipate that owner Jim Irsay is going to be able to deal with this type of performance much longer. Like if they
Mhm.
don't show improvement or they keep having these games where they're just getting completely embarrassed and outclassed, something's got to give. And I don't think that Irsay would have a coach be fired midway through a season, so I don't see that.
Mm.
But if there's not improvement with this team, I definitely think it opens up the possibility to look in a new direction at head coach, possibly GM as well after the season.
Man. The biggest thing though that you're looking for this week out of the team is what?
Yeah, so this week they're kind of evenly matched. The Broncos have been a bit disappointing as well. I think if they're just able to clean up all other self-inflicted wounds, that they'll be fine and they can win. Again, the miscommunications and things, all that stuff is correctable. Like protection issues and things aren't being called properly because there's free rushers all the time. Like if the defense is blitzing against the Colts, they'll get there because people just aren't picking it up. Kind of getting on top of that things and not turning the ball over at such an alarming rate. Like they're -6 right now in turnover differential. I think that's second to last in the league. Uh, that's easy stuff to not do. So like if they just take care of things and don't make those huge errors, because again, that's not things the opponents are forcing them into. That's stuff they're doing to themselves. Take care of that, and I do think they can beat the Broncos if they just get out of their own way a little bit.
Well, what do you think ultimately happens here based on what you've seen for the past month? Do you think they get out of their own way? They figure some stuff out. Naheem Hines gets involved. The screens are back. They get a little bit healthier. The offensive line improves a little bit. Do you see this still being a playoff team? Like, what is your gut telling you about which way this thing goes?
So they'll stay in it as long as the AFC South is how it is. The Texans aren't really a contender. The Titans are in just as odd of a spot as the Colts are, and the Jaguars they're competitive, but I don't think they're ready necessarily to be a playoff team. It doesn't seem like. So the Colts are still in it long term this season. They won't be a pretty playoff team if they make it, but Yeah, it's going to be an interesting rest of the season.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. The AFC South, like the best thing for Colts fans, I just feel like is this: nobody wants to win this division right now.
Exactly.
But I will say, before the year, I picked the Jaguars to win this division. So
They might do it.
I just Trevor Lawrence thing, man. They have rebuilt the Deshaun Watson, Bill O'Brien era. I think down there in Jacksonville, and quarterback matters. And Trevor Lawrence, if he's a top 10 quarterback by the end of the year, it's just those guys, generally speaking, win their divisions. It's just the way the NFL works when you have that kind of guy.
I think Doug Peterson knows how to use him now.
Yeah.
So the speed bump that was his rookie year for Trevor Lawrence, I think they're on the right track now.
I think so. We'll end on this, Jake, because we're both Peyton Manning guys right there behind me. The Tennessee variety, you with the Colts variety. I'm curious, what is your favorite Peyton Manning Colt memory?
Ooh, yeah. So the 2006-2007 AFC Championship at home against the Patriots to put them in that Super Bowl against the Bears. That game just meant so much. It's almost a joke around here. Like that AFC Championship win over Tom Brady and the Patriots meant more than winning the Super Bowl. That's a game that every Colts fan that was around back then will always remember for the rest of their life. That was such a good game. The Colts were down like 20, 23 points or something like that in the first half. The Patriots were killing them. They came back, and rest is history. Had a huge comeback in the second half, orchestrated by Peyton. Went on to win the Super Bowl. So that was an enormous moment in the city's history.
There you go, Jake. How do the good folks keep up with you and everything you've got going on with your Colts coverage this week?
Yeah, so I am one of the co-hosts of the Locked On Colts podcast over on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm also the deputy editor of horseshoehuddle.com. We're just churning out content left and right, trying to bring up some interesting and some tough topics that may not be fun to talk about regarding these Colts, but we'll lean towards the optimistic side when they give us a little more to do so. But no, we're around the clock Colts coverage on both those spots. So we would appreciate you guys following along.
There you go. Go subscribe. Check them out today as Jake and the team over at Locked On Colts do great Indianapolis Colts coverage as we try and figure out what the heck is going on with my dude. Save Matt Ryan 2022,
Right.
Jake Arthur. All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.